Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
How do you get to heaven? Do I really have to read the Bible? How do I pray? Did Jesus really walk on water? That's a doozy.
The podcast where kids can get answers to their big questions about faith. Here's your host, Pastor Eric.
Well, welcome to That's a Doozy, and today we have a special guest, but it's not your typical special guest. I am here with a friend, and I'll let him introduce himself, but it's not our typical guest on the show because today it's two old people talking. And by old, we're older than 12 is my guess. So I will let my friend introduce himself and we'll kind of talk about what this show is going to look like today.
Yeah, thanks. I'm Josh. I work here at Spirit 105.3. I work a lot with the podcasts for Purposely Network. I have the pleasure of editing That's a Doozy, and so I'm excited to be on this side of the microphone.
Josh, normally whenever we start out, I get to start off with a couple questions for the guests. And my first question is, how hard is it for you to edit That's a Doozy?
It's not as hard as you would think. A lot of the times it is just making sure the kids are like the same audio level as you, because I think they can get a little shy behind the microphone. Sometimes there is like a little bit of filler that I take out, but a lot of the meat and potatoes, I would say, they're there.
Okay, so you were talking about like the kids' questions. So my other question for you is, up to this point, what has been a question that has stood out to you the most that one of the kids has asked? You know what? Maybe not just a question, but maybe what is something that one of the kids have said that has stood out the most? Maybe that's a better question.
One of the questions that sticks out to me, and it's a question that I feel like is asked on most episodes, but it's important, is like, why does God allow us to be sick, or why does God allow bad things to happen? And I think that's something that even as adults, I think we can have a tendency to ask and to wonder. And so I think it's important that kids are looking at that and trying to make a connection between the good God that we have and the bad world that we live in. And then I think memorable moments, it was the first episode we recorded. You asked, what would you eat, or what's your favorite meal, or something along those lines, and they said horse meat. I want it. That's what I want to eat.
I remember that. Yeah. Oh. That was good. My good friend Tucker, he was all, I think that was him. He was all about that. And he never had it. Just to clarify, I think it's worth noting, he's not had it, but he's interested in trying that. One more question. Yeah. Did you go to church when you were a kid, when you were a child?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you enjoy going to Sunday school and going to church in the mornings?
Yeah, I did. I grew up in a smaller church, so a lot of the children's programming was like me and my siblings.
The worst classmates ever.
Exactly. And so I think that was interesting, but I did. Yeah, I loved the lessons, and I as a kid, you just get hyped up on lemonade and
Wait, your church, they gave you lemonade at church?
Yeah, well, after.
Still.
No, yeah, so we were bold. Yeah, lemonade, and we would use stir sticks as straws. So
yeah.
We'd have like 4 or 5 at a time, and we'd always get some interesting looks.
Oh man, it was animal crackers and water for us.
Okay.
Yeah, and man, sometimes you drop the animal cracker in the water and you didn't get more. So, that was not a traumatic experience for me at all. But what I was going to ask is, what is one of the most memorable experiences that you had as a child at church growing up?
Ooh. There was a particular Sunday school lesson. There were graham crackers and like frosting. And so it was just laid out like a normal, we're not going to do anything too serious. We're just going to decorate these graham crackers with frosting. Mm-hmm. And so we did that, and the teacher was like, okay, now put the frosting back. Put the frosting back in the container.
I think I know where this is going.
And so their point was the frosting was sin, right? And so once sin gets spread on the graham cracker or the world, as their analogy, it never comes you weren't ever able to completely clear it off. And so I think that stuck with me. That's something I still remember to this day. And then lock-ins were always fun.
That is fun. I remember a sleepover in one of our children's events, and my friend, he had like this camouflage tent that he brought, and all the friends, everyone was like, hey, and they're like trying to, bribe him so that they could sleep in that tent at night. And I won. Wow. I got to sleep in the tent that night. It was pretty exciting. The things that we remember.
What'd you have to bribe him with?
I don't remember. If I had lemonade, it would have been a for sure win, but we didn't get lemonade back then. So I know it wasn't that. Maybe Sour Patch Kids. That was a big win right there.
That's always a good one. Mm-hmm. So you grew up in New York, right?
Yes, but I need to clarify. Upstate New York. Okay, because typically you hear New York and everyone's like, city boy, and I'm like, nope. There were more cows than people in the town I grew up in. It's near Buffalo.
Okay,
and so it was a small town, but yeah, upstate New York on the East Coast is where I was born and raised.
Did you grow up at a church then too?
Yes. So I grew up, both my parents, they loved Jesus, and they demonstrated that on Sundays and Monday through Saturday. And I was really, really thankful for that. And my mom was a teacher. My dad, he was kind of a teacher. He worked with a lot of volunteers, in the community, but he did a lot of teaching. But I was very fortunate to grow up in the church, had a great experience. My parents, they were our Wednesday night children's program. They were the leaders of that for a number of years, and so that was always exciting. My mom was a kindergarten teacher, and I saw in her creativity and a desire to, teach kids, love on kids. And, she kind of demonstrated that for me. And I got involved helping with the children's program at church growing up. And I think as soon as I was in the youth program, I was volunteering in the kids' classrooms. Eventually, I went to summer camps working in the kids' programs. And so, it's kind of interesting that I look back at all the opportunities God gave me to serve with kids, and I had no idea that, fast forward a few years and one day I'd be a kids pastor.
Yeah.
But a lot of that I kind of got from watching my mom. So.
Yeah, and so walk me through the steps. Obviously, you're in the Seattle area now, so walk me through the steps of upstate New York to Seattle. Walk me through.
Sure thing. Well, and it's funny because I have two older brothers, and one's in Florida, the other's in Virginia, and I have to tell people and we do love each other, even though we're all spread out, and my parents are still in the same house that I grew up in. Long story short, I met my wife at a Bible school in New York, but she grew up in Washington, near Seattle. And so we met at a one-year Bible school and started dating. But of course, it was like, I need to, meet the family. So I came out to Seattle, met the family, and that went well. and met, at the time, it was her youth pastor who became the senior pastor. And he was like, hey, I'm looking for somebody who'd like to be an intern, in the summers. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm going to school to be a pastor. Here's a great opportunity for an internship, and I get to be with my girlfriend all summer. Yes, please. So that worked out really well. And eventually my family, my mother-in-law said, Eric, we love you, but if you take our daughter away, then there's going to be issues. And I'm like, you know what? Seattle's a great place. I love Seattle. And so, but truthfully, I continued on with my master's here at a small seminary that no longer exists, but it was in Tacoma. And so I finished that up and pastored at a church, in Kirkland for a number of years. And then, it was about 7 years ago, I moved to the church where I'm currently at as the children's pastor. And that's the quick version of kind of how I ended up here doing what I'm doing.
This is now the second season of That's a Doozy. And so through all those questions, has there been one for you that has been either like hard to answer from this is a tough question to dive into deeply and try to answer the question, but also make it understandable for the audience who's asking the question. Has there been a question like that has stuck out to you?
Oh, man. Honestly, sometimes the most difficult thing about answering a child's question is their questions are very, very pinpointed and very specific. Oftentimes, kids wonder about heaven and eternity and very specific questions. And the reality, the truth of the matter is, it's like, well, the scriptures don't give exact answers to that question. So you have to help them reframe that question in a broader way to answer it, but not as specific as they want. And so you're trying to help them to understand that, like, there is an answer to that, but it might not be exactly in the form that you were thinking about it. And so because their questions are so specific, sometimes it's just hard to, like, all right, how do we back this up and get a bigger picture? And then there are a number of questions that, it's difficult because the real answer is so complicated. And the real answer is, well, there's not an actual specific answer, right? I still remember one of the questions that the kids that a child asked, why did God let my friend get sick? And the scriptures do tell us about God's sovereignty, about his love, his grace, his compassion. It does give us clear answers about the effects of sin in this world and what God's desire for us is. But to be able to pack that into a 5, 10, 15-minute explanation, right? And to process that is really hard. So I try to say, all right, what's the first bite that we can take, that we can start chewing? And then after we chew on that for a little bit, we'll expand a little bit more. I think I don't know if I say it enough, but questions, when you answer a question, like, it's okay and it's good to have more questions after that. In fact, that should be the way it is. And I try to encourage kids to just keep asking questions, because I'm sure a lot of people have experienced a story with someone who, when they were growing in their faith or they had questions, they felt like they needed to suppress those questions and they couldn't ask it or it wasn't safe. And as a result, they end up thinking, well, there's not an answer. And the reality is, it's like, no, the scriptures hold the truth of who God is. And so you don't have to be afraid of asking questions when God is truth, right? And so it's good to push into that and to understand that there are good answers to our questions, and that we don't have to be afraid. And so if kids could grow up knowing that, hey, I've got a question about this, can I ask it? It's like, yes, you should. And you should keep asking questions. That's my desire, is for kids to know how important it is to bring those to the surface and to keep asking them, and not to back away. And so a podcast like this, I hope also encourages parents to really process things in a way that they can explain it to kids. Because I've even found that as a pastor, if I can explain it well to children, I actually end up having a better understanding of that topic and of that concept.
What sort of advice would you give to a parent or a grandparent? What sort of advice would you give those people to lean in to answering and fielding those questions when they themselves are growing in their faith and don't have answers?
I think my first piece of advice would be to recognize you do not need all the answers. In fact, it's good when you don't have all the answers, because it shows your child or your younger sibling that throughout all of life we're going to be asking questions, and we don't have to have all the answers. And so for parents, I always encourage them and say, it's okay to say, wow, that was a really good question. Mommy or daddy does not know the answer to that, but you know what? We should study that. We should look that up. We should go to, and then, we could go to our pastor and ask him, or let's read the Bible. Let's see what it says. And I also think that it's a really good thing to admit and to tell a child that you don't have all the answers, because we serve and we love an infinite God. And I remember we talked about this in one of the episodes, and I'm teaching the kids, what's the difference between infinite and finite, right? We're limited in our understanding. And it's a good thing that we have a God who is infinite and beyond what we can comprehend. I don't want to serve a God who I can fully pack into a box and understand. And I want my boys to know that God is so big, He is so great, that there are going to be things and concepts that we can't fully comprehend. That doesn't mean we don't think about it. That doesn't mean we don't try to understand, but it's actually a good thing that we don't understand. And so I try to encourage parents with those two things. Don't feel like you need to know all the answers, and celebrate the fact that our God is so great that we can't know all the answers. But it's really fun searching and trying.